Kia ora ono i te iwi. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that small break. So this time, I'd like to introduce myself. So thank you, Toiroa. So, turn page. Toiroa Williams, and I'll speak in third person, it sounds quite cool, is a Māori documentary filmmaker with tribal links across Te Whakatohea, Ngaitai, and Te Whānau Apani. He is passionate about telling stories, but more importantly, Indigenous stories specific to his people, which might aid in the teaching of their tribal history to future generations. He completed a master's degree in documentary filmmaking in 2016, has been a recipient of numerous scholarships, including the AUT interns at Sundance Institute, and he is currently completing a PhD that considers Māori approaches to Indigenous filmmaking. E te iwi, please clap your hands for Toi. Kia ora, thank you, thank you. Atua tai ake ngā mane ngā reo koutou ko tai mai I rungi I te aroha I tēnei rangi tēnā koutou katoa. Ki tautoko au ngā mihi kua mihi ai tēnei rangi, o tira ngā kōrero papairo atu, ko whakarongo hia e tātou. Nō reira mihi ka tika kia koutou, a tēnā koutou. Just want to acknowledge all our speakers before me, and moving into this space now. And so, yes, as you know, this is something very close to my heart, but I can't go without acknowledging my supervisors in this space create this. So, matua Professor Welby, Professor Matau, and Associate Professor Dr. Marcos, me ka tika kia koutou. Thank you for all that you do. And if you look here on this first slide, I'm literally talking about myself. So it's only appropriate that I let you know who I am. But more importantly, within this, we talk about actually being the research. And that's something I really, really found intriguing when I was reading Professor Wellbeing's concepts around making ourselves a part of the research and then following the aspects of heuristic inquiry and not being subjective, actually objective. I am the research. Because I don't know me, no one knows us better than ourselves sometimes. My mother would plead otherwise. And so I want to begin with this slide here. And in Te Reo Māori, we say ko WAI AU. So ko doesn't really have a literal translation. It just means listen up, the next thing is of importance. And the next thing is a question, and that word is wai, W-A-I. And then O being ahau or me. So me as a person, wai being who. So we're asking, who am I? But in Te Reo Māori, we might say ko wai tō ingoa, who is your name, rather than what is your name in English. So why being the person, the who. And so I'm asking in this presentation today, which is titled Ko Wai Au, who am I? Because as many Māori, we descend from gods, as you would have heard this morning. We descend from chiefs. We descend from warriors, from lovers, from people across this globe, and we're all connected. And we're connected to the land. Ko au te whenua, ko te whenua ko au. I am the land, and the land is me. But for some of us, we walk across this world not truly knowing the depth of our identity or who we are. And so this research and this presentation today looks at understanding who we truly are and our connections, and returning to those historical elements of our whakapapa, genealogy, our whānau, our families, but of course our histories, our kōrero, our intergenerational knowledge that's been handed down over generations. And so I begin with this waiata here, which was written by Tāwhiro Maxwell and Te Okeroa Huriwaka. And they wrote this for the specific reasons of making sure those descendants from their iwi know who they are. And we can just look at them. E kore au e ngaro. I shall never be lost. E kore au, and you'll see that repetition of au, as in me. E kore au e whakamā. I shall never be ashamed. For I am he kaha nei ahau ki te kimi ki te rapu ko wai au. For I am determined to seek and search from whence I came. Manene ki te motu, manene ki te ao, aha pēhera. Should I roam the expenses of our nation or the expanses of the world, no matter where I happen to be, I shall never forget. Ki taku kaipo, e kore e wareware ki taku kaipo, heuri no te whakatōhea. So I shall never forget the most precious part of me, my identity, that I am a descendant of the tribe of the people of whakatōhea. And so this waiata ahakoa, he eti ngā kupu, he nui ngā kōrero. Although there are only a few words here, they speak volumes and volumes to these descendants. Because during this time, majority of the people and descendants of my generations, and even generations before me, were displaced from knowing who we are. As I get older, I find out that that was on purpose. That was on purpose to colonize our people, to assimilate us into a system that isn't made for us. And so I'm doing this research on myself because I'm learning more about my people as an adult. Because growing up, I didn't have that connection. But that's okay. Nō reira, ana I te waiata. He uri no te whakatōhea, e kore au e ngaro, e kore au e whakama, e kaha nei ahau, ki te kimi ki te rapu ko wai au. Ko wai au, hi! Manene ki te motu, manene ki te ao, aha pehara. He kore ware ware, ki taku kaipo, he uri no te whakatōhea. He uri no te whakatōhea. Hi au e hi. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So my album comes out next week. No. So it's a meaningful song for me as a descendant. But it's a meaningful song for the motu, for everyone, to connect us back, to make sure that, hey, it's okay. So this story brings me right back to the history of our people being displaced, understanding the years in our history so that we stand confident in who we are today, 2022. So I turn to this next slide. Thank you, caller. I turn to this next slide here. And as you can see, these beautiful photographs that we took just this year show the land of where our people come from, the mountains and the rivers. So when we talk about I am the land and the land is me, anei, ko māki o te maunga I muri nei, ko waiawa te awa e rere nei. Mākio is the ancestral mountain, and the waters of which it feeds is the waiawa. Furthermore, our waiawa marae of Ngāti Patu Moana, te hapu, is our sub-tribe from which we have connections. And going back far enough, Māori are very, very good at finding connections to all our hapu, to all our tribes. But you have these primary tribes that nurture you and look after you. And especially when you get into the inter-Māori games, you have to pick one. Because it gets very serious. But the saying in the top corner there was said by our ancestor, a paramount chief of the area known as Mokomoko. And he uttered these words at the end of a very, very sad conclusion to what is being now recognized this year as an injustice that the Crown inflicted upon our people over 157 odd years ago, which isn't long. And he talked about this saying, tango hia mai te taura I taku kaki, kia waiata ahau I taku waiata. Take this rope from my neck so that I may sing my song. And he was charged with the murder of Vulkna, a missionary down in Te Whakatohea in the 1860s. And if you know of that era, it was very contentious with the musket wars, with the government of Governor Gray setting up here in Tāmaki, with the land wars of Waikato. Across Aotearoa, we were at war. But again, we don't really learn about that within our kura today, and sadly that's been done on purpose. It's only in recent reforms in government that we see that it is now mandatory to teach history in schools. My question to that is, whose version? Because the versions that have been told, well, history is written from the vicar, and the victor is always going to align it with their views and their bias. But then I'm also of the opinion that all versions are correct. All versions have a truth. And so this is my vision. So to quote one of our rangatira and tohunga o Te Whakatohea, Dr. Te Kahautu Maxwell, he states, I am a survivor of the 1860s Muru Whenua land confiscation policy period of Aotearoa's dark history. On the 2nd of March 1865, the missionary Reverend Carl Sylvius Vulkna was executed by hanging in Opotiki by Kiriope Te Rau of Ngāti Rangiwewehi, who had travelled to Opotiki with the Pai Marire movement, known as the Ho-Hos. Missionary Vulkna was accused of spying for Governor George Gray, informing the government of Te Whakatohea deliberations about coming to the assistance of Waikato in their fight against Pākehā at Ōrākau in 1864. So a lot of different parts to this story. It is a very complex story. As we know, all our history is in Aotearoa if you really start to dive in. But I'm looking for my place in here. Because prior to this, Opotiki was very prosperous, extremely prosperous, where we were feeding Tāmaki Makaurau. Here we are in Auckland in this beautiful whare. They were shipping ships up, 20-odd ships were owned, and schooners by the iwi, and we were trading. We were powerful. We were participating in the economy and in the country, but overnight we went from prosperous to poverty. Again, systemically and on purpose. So justice was a tool rather than a concept. So, I roto wēnei kōrero, inside this kōrero you can see Moko Moko has been charged with all of Te Whakatohea's wrongdoing. And he was taken to Mount Eden and he was hanged until he was dead in 1866. And those were his last words. And he is saying that he dies an innocent man. And for what? Because he was. And when we think about Mount Eden just being only a few kilometres away from here, and to know that he didn't return home until the 80s, you just can only imagine that time and period. And again, you learn about this as an adult, which really breaks my heart. And so through that kaua, government came into Opotiki to fulfill what they needed, which was land. They needed land for the settlers, and this was a way in, unfortunately, to our demise. Coming through Moko Moko, we can connect back, and he has many descendants. But I read from documents that it actually wasn't very nice to be a Moko Moko, or to be a part of that whānau. And actually, you'd try and do anything not to be one. But I proudly stand here as a descendant of Moko Moko, talking about singing his song. And it comes through our whakapapa, or genealogy. And through my great-grandmother, Nani Ripeka, and Koro Amakura, who lived very humble days, but were very resilient in their ways. They birthed my grandmother, Gladys, or Te Wairemana Coleman, and my grandfather there, Te Hau Coleman. And so through that whakapapa, it goes down through to my mother, and then down to me, the youngest of four, and the most handsome. And humble. But whakapapa is so important to te ao Māori, for the Māori people. We can trace our lineage right back, and when we are talking to each other, another concept, just like ko WAI AU, who am I, we're not asking who are you right in front of us, but who are the hundreds and hundreds of people behind you that bring you here today. And those connections are the power of what we call manaakitanga, which you heard earlier, about connecting and looking after one another. The collective agreement. And so I'm connecting back to te whakatoa here, I'm connecting back to my people, and I'm learning about myself as an adult. And one avenue that I knew was a powerful tool is to reconnect with our histories and our kōrero, but majority of our stories aren't written. As I talked about earlier, the intergenerational knowledge through kapahaka and waiata, which you would have heard earlier as well, around song and dance. Within our carvings, our stories are being told. Upon the land, significant sites, within ancient chants and rituals. And so I joined our kapa to learn more about myself before the whole concept of understanding that it would be a significant part of this journey of my doctorate, but more importantly, knowing who I am. Because universities play a part in holding that knowledge and developing it, but kapahaka, Māori performing arts, are the closest traditional elements, I believe, of holding mātauranga Māori knowledge, histories, kōrero, through waiata and song. And so going down there was, again, a powerful experience of finding out who I am, because not only was I happened to join Opotiki Mai Tawhiti, which was founded by Professor Te Kahautu Maxwell, and many others, Auntie Dawn, Matua Richard, Mitai, Dawn Hill. They had a vision for our people to sing about who we are and to be proud about who we are, because we were coming out, I think it's only 20 odd, maybe 30 years ago that this kapa was being around. I can honestly stand here and say they are a premier kapa, and it was very hard. And sometimes I'm standing there, my goodness, why did we do this to ourselves? No one gets paid. We all get paid in aroha and mātauranga. And we travel long distances, some even fly from Australia sometimes, and we do it for the love of who we are. So I must me mihika tika ki a koutou ngā rangatiri o te kapa nei, because I've learned so much about myself along this journey. And so understanding more of our history, learning through universities, but then also going into our traditional knowledge in Opotiki within our families, I then find that the collaboration of knowing who we are is paramount to finding out knowledge. And that's where we came to the concept of mahitahi, or collaboration, working together for a common goal and a common purpose. Within the concept of mahitahi, we're talking about developing a film. We're talking about creating a film that might aid in these healing aspects, that might aid in the healing and understanding of who we are and how I am a part of this family. Because many of my generation are still on their journey of learning and understanding their connection, their whakapapa, their hitori, their stories. And so, like Tangaroa, I had the privilege of working closely with Dr. Marcos and bringing him into Te Whakatoa here to develop my own personal skills around photography. But Dr. Marcos also talks about the concept of Mauri, which is the spiritual life force in the Māori world. And he was very intrigued about understanding how Māori believe that the land is alive, and the land is a part of me, and I am the land, and we return back to that land. And you almost think it's the Māori version of Lion King, but it really is a concept of making sure that we're part of a bigger picture rather than excluding ourselves and putting us at the top of the pyramid. And so when I worked with Marcos, not only did he understand concepts of Te Ao Māori, I can honestly say now he is an honorary member of the iwi, and before he even picked up a camera, we went around visiting urupa, or graves and burial sites, to speak to those who have gone on, because we don't think they've gone, they've just gone on their next journey. But we always can call them back, we can ask for advice. Just like the mountains, we can speak to those concepts, so we're all connected. So at the end, we'll be talking about this, and I love this image here because it talks about the beauty of a coastal town, but there's some difficulties. There's some highs and lows, and there's a horizon and a tomorrow. And so the film will follow those concepts of how do we work together, how do we tell a story about yourself, because sometimes whakahihi, to put yourself in the middle is a bit different, but there's power in that as well. There's power in putting yourself in there, because when you know who you are, then you know where you're going, you can stand confidently in the world. And so collaboration was key concept, and then coming to the calms of the emotions. And so looking at whakatoa here in a new light, going through those difficulties and looking at the calm of the future and the prosperity that can be. Which is always talking about looking to the stars, which is literally where we're going next. And so as you come into whakatoa here, you'll be greeted by these two po that talk about our people, our town, our struggles, and knowing that although it's a small rural town of 4,000 in the township, about 9,000, 10,000 within the district, and hundreds of acres of land that really isn't still untouched, or is in farmland, horticulture and agriculture, the prosperity of that to empower our people to do well and go home is right there in front of us. But working together is how I truly believe we'll get there. And to work together, we need to know where we come from and where we fit in this puzzle. Nō reire rungi te aroha e te iwi. Can I just point you to our last slide, which I've taken from the Whakatoa Māori Trust Board, who write, kia whatua te kāwai o te tangata, kia whitauria te kiwai o te kete, kia tāniko hia te kāwai rangatira. Now this whakatauki o Māori proverb looks at weaving the strands of people together to give handles to the spiritual kete and to embellish that work with a fitting nobility. So working together, doing my piece in this bigger puzzle of creating a space for my generations and those to come and those before me to heal on this journey, a long journey, right back to our ancestor, moko moko. Nō reire te whānau. Tēnā koutou. Thank you all very much for listening and being a part, bringing a safe place for me to share a little bit about yours truly right here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, you have the questions. Just a second so we can open.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. So here's a question. Thank you for the question. Much obligated by the organisation and presentations of the second day of Link. Oh, it is an honour and privilege to have this learning opportunity for all of us in Brazil and in Latin America. Oh, tēnā koutou. All the presentations are very inspiring and mean a lot to us. Very able to share experiences, the history and the project of Toiroa is very inspirational for all of us in Brazil, Latin America. Kia ora. How filmmaking can be employed as an instrument to heal old wounds from colonial times. If it is not possible to change the past, how do we move to the future? How to accept the injustices of a past and move on after so much injustice? Ooh. That's a really good question. How do we move through it? And if I look at myself and what I'm doing is knowledge, knowing the past, but not blaming. Because the knowledge, and if you do all that knowledge with nobility and wondering how we can move together, to work together, to build something, to weave together all of our concepts, all of our knowledge. So you understand me and I understand you. I almost guarantee you that would be a better future. Otherwise, you might want to talk to the Minister, Foreign Affairs, because that was a very, very big question. Kia ora. No more questions? Oh, there is another one. Thank you for the question. Māori society seems to place a high value on collectivity. Very good. Yes, 10 points. How does one find their personal identity in this context? Is there any kind of difficulty for individuals to find their own selves, or is the concept of individuality a Western issue that is conflict with a Māori collectivity? These must be professors. Mike, that is a great question. You're absolutely right. Māori are a collective community, and individuality is, I think, to a degree, a Western concept. But there are moments. There are moments for those spaces for Māori to be there, to soak it up, to be out front. But the front is only as strong as the back. And ko te hāpai o ki mua, ko te hāpai i ku muri. So the front and the back are two in one. And so there are moments and times within the Māori community where you'll have your day to stand there proud, to show who you are. And we do that very much in concepts like here we are in this marae, to be who we are in this marae, and we follow processes and traditional ceremonies to allow us safe spaces to be individuals, but we always work in a collective. So finding your identity is actually a collective concept, because your identity is connecting you to others alike. So it's one and the same. Again, you could also ask the Minister of Māori, because that is another very, very big question. So I hope I did answer that justly, but I see them as the same thing. Thank you. Well, Toiroa, thank you very much for that kōrero. Kia ora. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to take a quick 3-minute break, and we'll return at 8:29 a.m. Ka pai. See you all soon.